I've seen a lot of people say now that Void has been nerfed from giving 20% set bonus to 10% set bonus, that Void is now ruined. It's not going to be good, at least for PvP, because it is not as strong as it used to be. Well, that's not necessarily true. As far as I'm concerned, there's two main types of accounts that actually use Void to PK. That is accounts with 42 defense, and that's accounts with everything else above 42 defense. So we are going to assume that the accounts with 42 defense, well, you have to assume that it's only going to be using Eagle Eye, because that is the only prayer that you can actually use with 42 defense that will actually buff your ranged level, as opposed to using Rigour, and that is the other account build that I consider using. So as of right now, there are two new max hits with both the D-bow and the heavy ballista for both levels. When it comes to 99 ranged with Eagle Eye, you are able to max a 70 with the heavy ballista, and with the D-bow you are able to cap out at a 46 dark bow spec, which that's still pretty good. That is still pretty good in my eyes. I only have 95 range on this account with Rigour, which is going to change soon, but that doesn't matter. I can hit a 71 with this, and I do also know the max hit of the heavy ballista as is, which this is Wiggled's Twitter. He hits a 73. Probably the funniest number on RuneScape, let's be real. And this next one's kind of obvious, 48, which is where it actually gets capped at. That's, of course, with the Dark Bow, and with the Dragon Throne Axe, I can hit a 28, which you could probably hit a 29 or a 30 still, with 99 ranged. There are two different types of accounts that you are mainly going to be up against around the maxed out Void level, which is about 89, somewhere thereabouts. Although we could pretty much just say any Voider between level 60 and level 90, because it does scale relatively well, but we will just be doing this on a maxed Voider. So thank you to James for letting me PK on his account for like 40 minutes. That's his channel right there down below. It's not in the video, but it's in the description. Right down there. Click it. Anyway, when it comes to actually fighting peers with Void, it's still good. It's still just as good. They don't have any defense, so you can just sit there and rip through them, especially if you use rune knives or whatever it might actually be. And even though you aren't hitting as high as often, you are still sitting there and just absolutely ripping through them, because they're pures. You are still always going to be able to own pures when it comes to Void. Pures have been and will probably always be very easy to rip into when you have Void ranged. The main point of actually even having ranged is because your best defense is a good offense, and that's the basic idea behind Void as is. So when it comes to fighting Pures, Void's still good. Doesn't hit as strong, but it's definitely still good. So fighting Pures or people with no armor, definitely still good, although you're not going to be able to hit as high. But when it comes to fighting Zerkers with Eagle Eye and Void range and everything, definitely a bit different of a story. Now don't get me wrong, it's definitely not bad by any stretch, but it is nowhere near as powerful before. As I said earlier, for Void, your offense is your defense, and you need to be able to hit as often as you possibly can. And if you can't hit on people, then you are definitely left a lot more open to taking hits. The higher that your opponent's defense goes, it's the less likely that you are going to be able to kill them. Although, again, you still run the chance of killing them. Although, after fighting for a decent amount of time against Zerkers, it's still definitely noticeable that you don't hit as high. But in my opinion, this is a really good thing, because it balances out fighting Voiders against Zerkers. Beforehand, you would just have to worry about someone pulling out their ballista and just hitting up to 70 damage on you relatively easy, and they could one-tick this. It could be very fast, especially if it's their PID. You die in no time. The amount of damage you were able to put out before using a heavy ballista as well as Dragon Throne Axes was a huge amount. It was just... it wasn't even fair. It was not close to fair. So now when a Voider and a Zerker fight, it's definitely a lot more of an even playing field. A Voider isn't just going to drop you very fast now, although there is still a decent chance that you could die to a Voider, because it's still decent. It's not terrible. There is a noticeable difference, though, when fighting Zerks before and after the nerf. Alright, so when it comes to post-nerf, using Rigour alongside Ballista, still good. Still good in my opinion. You don't hit as high, definitely, but it's still good. I found myself still being able to compete even with the damage reduction. Beforehand, depending on what armor you were fighting, you were pretty much able to just destroy anybody. Didn't really matter which combat level, Rigour, heavy ballista, it was all very overpowered. The only time I would ever say that Void wasn't that good was when it came to fighting tanks with Torags or whatever it might actually be. If they have a high defense level, then it's just not good. Void's really not that great. I mean, occasionally you do hit very high, but it's only very occasionally. It's not very good to fight people with Torags as is, but it kind of never really was good to fight people with Torrags. That's pretty much it. I mean, you guys don't need to actually take my word on any of this. You can go test it yourself, but I tested both for quite a few hours. The one thing that I kept consistently noticing is that it's a lot more balanced when it comes to fighting people with defense. Because beforehand, unless they had big tank armor, as I said earlier, you were able to rip through them. It didn't matter. If you had a heavy ballista, you don't even need rigour, but obviously if you had rigour, then you just destroyed people. It depends on the combat level you were actually at. It was alright with Eagle Eye at a max level, but rigour, it's just an entirely different ball game. It was very good to actually use it beforehand, and it's still pretty decent now, although it's a lot more balanced in my opinion. So whether it be on a 42 defense Voider, a rigour Voider, or a maxed main with rigour, it's still good, although it's not as great. The PvP meta beforehand was kind of just accepting of the fact that Void was overpowered, but with this update, I really do think it brings Void back down to a more fair and balanced level. Beforehand, it was just way too overpowered for PvP. Now it's a lot less overpowered. In my opinion, this update definitely brought balance to Void. And the Serpentine helmet, well, that just kind of sucks for Pugger. Although, yeah, I'm not really too sure on that. I feel as though it's a good buff, or rather a good nerf, but who knows? All I know is Will just wasted 500 hours on an account. Everyone say RIP Pugger in the comments. Okay, thanks for watching, bye.